Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Aston Martin have tried to sign every top name in Formula 1 over the last few years on the aerodynamic side, on the engine side, on the management side, and it's also true on the driver side as well, securing Alonso a couple of years ago. But it's no secret, Alonso is no spring chicken anymore, and according to reports, Aston Martin, Adrian Newey, among others, they want Max Verstappen as their next driver in that team. They don't believe that Alonso may last forever. They don't believe that Lance Stroll is frankly good enough to compete with the championship challenges they are trying to put together with all of this investment over the coming years. Reports have it they might be offering Max up to $1 billion to make this deal happen. Aston Martin today deny those rumours emphatically, but the sources are saying it for some reason you might imagine. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. We are right in the heart of the off-season. It has been 40 days since Abu Dhabi concluded. It is 40 days until pre-season testing begins. That does not mean that there's nothing happening, because in Formula 1, there's always something going on behind the scenes, as we shall discuss today. Just quickly on Ferrari, they've been killing it, I think, with their social media stuff in recent times. Of course, with Hamilton about to join. Well, he has joined, but his first day in Maranello is going to be in a couple of days on an official capacity. This I thought was kind of cool as well. They added a couple of home Grand Prix. So Imola, Monza, of course, Monaco for Charles Leclerc. But also for Hamilton, they've added Silverstone as Hamilton's first home race in the colour red. And then they also had Brazil, because of course Hamilton is an honorary Brazilian citizen as of a couple of years ago. This was also mentioned today. So it will be Hamilton-Leclerc starting work together at Maranello next week. They've confirmed that Riccardo Adami is going to be Hamilton's race engineer. We'll get to that in a second. These were kind of the latest takeaways. He's already visited Maranello informally. Hamilton, he's met Riccardo Adami, as I just mentioned, who is expected to be his race engineer. He's expected to move near to Maranello for this steep learning phase in the near future. He's not going to be staying at Enzo Ferrari's old residence. I know that he ruled that one out. January 22nd is expected to be the day in the morning, and then Charles Leclerc is going to get the testing time just afterwards in the afternoon in the F175, potentially at Fiorano, potentially elsewhere, maybe on a different date, depending on the weather, basically, over the next few days. But I'm sure Ferrari have a reasonable idea what they're targeting to try and do right now. Adami, of course, former Vettel, former Sainz race engineer. We believe that Hamilton was on the phone or on the WhatsApp to Vettel to say, hey, is this guy any good? Like, is it going to work out for me? At the end of the day, these partnerships are usually personality-based. And while Ferrari's communication has at times been questionable in recent years, I think there are instances, I don't know if you guys remember when Sainz and I think it was Adami were communicating in Silverstone, was it last year? When they were talking about the rain and they had agreed before the race the different colour codes for the intensity of the rain. And I just thought that was kind of like a nice touch, really. So there's obviously something in that. Vettel believes he's a good man for the job. Hamilton seems to trust that opinion. Fred Vasseur was also talking about Christian Horner's perspective on some regard in terms of the rivalry between Hamilton and Leclerc. I think next year there is absolutely a world in which Ferrari win the constructors but not the drivers, because Hamilton and Leclerc will be taking points off one another. At Red Bull, that's not really a problem. Even they're literally telling Lawson, don't even try and beat Max. Jos Verstappen has said it. Helmut Marko has basically said it. Stay in your lane, Liam. Drive the car 0.3 a lap slower than Max and we'll be happy if you don't beat him very often. If you beat him once out of 24 races, that's fine for Max, and Red Bull won't mind too much as well. But of course, well, they'll mind if you're not P1, P3, P1, P2, if you're P1, P11, or, you know, as we've seen over the last couple of years, that causes problems in the constructors. But Max, who's trying to win more drivers' titles, he might not mind too much, but Fred Vasseur did say it's much better to fight for first and third than to fight for 19th and 20th, which is, you know, sure, that's true. And, you know, the inter-team rivalry is a good problem on some regards. You want your drivers to push each other to the maximum. You want your drivers to score the most points, assuming they don't crash into one another, which I don't think Hamilton and Leclerc will, because they are two of the most respectful racers on the track and excellent wheel-to-wheel racers in their own right. But it is a relevant discussion anyway as to what it's going to mean for the championships next year. Just another thing a couple of guys pointed out to me today. This has been added to the Scuderia Ferrari website or whatever. Now, it's €70, so feel free to get it if you want. Not sponsored by Ferrari. Imagine they actually sponsored me. Today's video is proudly presented by Scuderia Ferrari Formula 1 team. It's not, but they are selling a €70 Polo, which is two-tone. So here you go. And again, the notable thing is the colour, the fact that it's this like darker shade of red. And it's also like a two-tone thing. I think that's what was getting people's attention today. That there's, you can notably see that at the bottom of the polo here, it's a darker shade of red than the top. And it's obviously caused questions as to whether that's what they're cooking for their livery, in terms of they'll run like a two-tone livery. So it's going to be a darker red, but maybe it's going to, have a gradient from a darker to a slightly lighter shade. I don't know. Everyone's talking about it, aren't they? The livery for the SF25, if it's even going to be called that. I used to not really massively care about liveries, and I still kind of don't. I'm more interested how quick the car is. But this has kind of got my attention a little bit, I will say. This whole Ferrari livery saga that's been going on over the last few days, exactly what they're going to cook up, and whether, they're going to have painted it. We're going to see it on the 18th of February anyway, what exactly they're planning for the new season. Just before we get to the Aston Martin stuff, Toto's been at it again. We know that Cadillac are joining in Formula 1 for 2026. We know that the Concord Agreement signed a couple of years ago said if you want to join, you've got to pay $200 million, because the belief was, given the valuation of the teams at the time, that $200 million was enough to compensate the other 10 teams from the reduced slice of the pie that they get from splitting all the media rights revenue, and everything associated with that gets split 11 rather than 10 ways. The teams agreed, all right, if you pay $200 million, that compensates us for several years of those type of payments, and that'll be fair enough. However, given that the value of the sport has gone up immensely, and somehow we've got teams now being valued in the billions of dollars, Toto Wolff himself is a billionaire as a result of a lot of this stuff, there's been a feeling that, well, new teams have to pay more. The teams came together and they agreed $450 million. It was the money that Cadillac would effectively pay as that dilution fee for the other teams. Toto says should have been more. Should have been way more than that. I know that some teams wanted it to be up to $1 billion. So anyway, I don't think 450 million payment sounds too shabby as far as I'm concerned if I was one of the other teams. But Toto says it should have been more, and he's standing by that opinion. But let's talk about Red Bull, Aston Martin, and especially the state of affairs with Max Verstappen, because last year there were multiple moments where the friction between Max and his own team were quite severe. There were even rumours that, some of his engineers, his mechanics were not necessarily best pleased. Let's say Hungary, for example, even it was George Russell that said this, right? That after Hungary, the way that Max, was on the radio, and obviously the crash at the end of the race, and loads of other factors, meant that, reportedly anyway, some of his engineers and mechanics were sending their CVs to other teams saying, I don't want to work with this guy anymore. That's what George said. Of course, George said that after having to beef with Max, so who knows what's really true. The bottom line is that there's no doubt that Max was entertaining discussions, and Max's team were absolutely, and probably continually are to this day, entertaining discussions with other teams. There have been reports that Jos Verstappen basically has, or at least had, a verbal agreement with Toto Wolff that the Verstappens, and maybe Helmut Marko as well, would go over there. Obviously, Toto was flirting very openly with Verstappen as well, and you also had Mike Crack from Aston Martin saying that Max Verstappen is open to join our team whenever he likes. That's basically what he said, that the door is always open to Max. That's what Aston Martin said. So with Red Bull struggling at times last year, and with rumours about whether their wind tunnel isn't the best, especially when you're coming down to the final hundreds of developing these Formula 1 cars and the final year of the regulations, the problems with correlation they might potentially still experience, there has been talk as to whether Red Bull's 2025 car is going to have similar problems over the last couple of years. And that, of course, would be a push factor for Max Verstappen to potentially leave. I think for Max, what really matters is trying to win the championship this year with Red Bull, and then what happens in 2026. I wonder if I'm Max, whether I would leave Red Bull before 2026. As in, if you're Max, does it make sense? Try to win this year's championship in 25. He may win it. He may be the favourite, depending on your perspective. Then in 2026, brand new set of regulations. Who knows? Maybe Red Bull kill it. But they're certainly not the favourites, Red Bull, in 2026. That's probably Mercedes, because their engine is seemingly very good according to various reports. But of course, Honda, who have done a great job with Red Bull's engine for the last several years, they're going to Aston Martin, of course. So that's a key talking point there as well. If you're Max, though, do you just see in 2026 what Red Bull do? And if they don't deliver a good job, you just go to the best team in 2027. That may be a viable option, to be fair. But if there's a feeling that in 2026 it's going to lean a certain way, maybe Max will behave differently. So Aston Martin have been recruiting everywhere. They've tried to sign every single big name in the sport. They have an unbelievable technical facility, and we've not seen that play out in their results on track over the last couple of years. Their progress has stuttered for sure since the start of 2023. But nonetheless, there's no doubt in my mind they have all of the pieces they would require on paper to be a championship winner. And that's what they're trying to achieve over the next few years, certainly in 2026, 7, 8 years like that. So everyone's going there. Haas race engineer going to Aston Martin. Of course, Andy Cowell, legend in Formula One. Basically, he was leading up the Mercedes engine program when they dominated from 2014 onwards. Cowell's now taken charge fully as the team principal of the operation. And they got Adrian Newey, for God's sake, into the team as well, kind of scooping him away from what looked like a potential move to Ferrari. So Andy Cowell is saying Aston Martin, they need 90% of their upgrades to work if they're going to want to win a championship. I thought this is a funny statement as well, saying that they won the championship, Aston, for the most upgrades, but they just didn't work. It's a pretty funny idea, even that, you know, basically Aston Martin, congratulations, you delivered the most new parts to the car, but obviously half of them didn't do anything, or were actually a negative to the performance of the car. So, you know, they've got Andy Cowell from an engine side, they've got Adrian Newey from an aerodynamic side, they've got many other individuals from, management side as well, and they've got Fernando Alonso, one of the best drivers to ever do it in Formula One. But Fernando Alonso is like 43 years old, and Lance Stroll isn't a championship winning driver as far as most people are concerned. So that has raised questions on whether Max Verstappen is a target. Now, there's absolutely zero doubt that Max Verstappen is a target. Like, if Max said, hey, I want to join, they're going to let him join, and they are going to try and make him do so. There's no doubt in my mind that is true. Of course, would Max do it? What would it take for Max to do it? That is a slightly different question. So the Daily Mail yesterday came out with this article where they said that basically Aston Martin have been selling sponsorships on the promise, not exactly promise, but on the assumption that Verstappen is going to be joining them soon, to such an extent that they would be willing to pay $1 billion, or £1 billion even, to make this thing happen. So, well, where do we begin with this? I just wanted to show kind of what the race said about it, kind of breaking down the article. So, effectively, a deal might be on the radar, is rumours. Sources hinted that Aston Martin had been telling potential sponsors about why the team was so attractive because its long-term future perhaps involved Verstappen. The Daily Mail then went and said that Jeffrey Slack, managing director of commercial and marketing team at Aston Martin, had made pitches that Verstappen would be joining them, but emphasised this was more a firm desire than a done deal, but obviously implying that there must be some conversation there that's going down to the line. The story quoted an unnamed source suggesting remarks are about bigging up future prospects rather than confirmation of a deal being in place, but then they go on to say, Jeff, as that his name, or Jefferson, has been going around saying Max will be joining Aston Martin. The source told the newspaper as it held a $1 billion bid. Maybe it is $1 billion, whatever. I mean, it's an absurd amount of money. It may be a ploy, adding extra value to the deal that he wants to do, but bringing in Max also makes perfect sense. So Aston Martin have rubbished this, and they said the team categorically denies the claims in the story. And even I think Verstappen's camp came out today and said, well, actually what Verstappen's camp said is, that's nice, which is a very interesting comment, I thought. So, yeah, Verstappen's been linked to Aston Martin a few times now, and the idea that Aston Martin would be willing to pay whatever it takes to get Max also would not be a massive surprise on some level. Whether Max would feel like it's a good idea, that is a very different question, but it's not like, you know, his team have denied it. Aston Martin have denied it, as of course they would, but it's not like his own team have denied it. And it's not like Red Bull are saying anything or are going to say anything about it as well. So what do you guys think about this? The idea of coming to Max and saying, look, we'll pay you effectively $1 billion to, leave your team. And I'm sure that the money involved there, because let's be honest, right? These guys are getting paid $100 million a year, pretty much. Now, obviously, there's other expenses in play, there's taxes and all this stuff. And I'm sure the £1 billion, a lot of that would be going to Red Bull to like buy him out of the contract or something like that. And then some of the money, I'd imagine, would go to Max. He'd get a massive joining bonus. He'd become the most paid driver in Formula One 2-3 times over, where he currently is. I mean, it would be insane, but it is something that Aston Martin could or potentially would even consider doing. So this is the latest rumour on it. As I say, of course, these are rumours, but would it surprise you if this was true? if we believe that Aston Martin may be telling sponsors that this is very likely to be the case, they wouldn't do that, I wouldn't suggest, if there was no chance at all, if there had been no discussions to this end. I'm not saying it's a done deal, it's not a done deal, but it's something that, certainly after signing Newey, they will feel like it's possible. I mean, Hamilton joined Ferrari, and he has done this year. Newey has joined Aston Martin from Red Bull. Like, anything is possible in Formula 1, it seems, at the moment. Of course, there is a theory, understandably, that Verstappen has driven Newey cars basically his whole career. Newey's gone to Aston from Red Bull. Honda have gone to Aston from Red Bull. Those are two big pieces of Verstappen's success. And understandably, if you're Newey and you're just Aston Martin in general, you're looking at your driver lineup. Because on paper, everything about Aston Martin is setting up to succeed. They've got this absolute state-of-the-art facilities, probably the best in Formula 1. They're so new. The wind tunnel, of course, is there. The simulator work. And they've got the best people. I mean, Adrian Newey, Andy Cowell, among many others they've signed to the organisation over the last few years. The question is to some extent on the drivers. Like, I've got no doubts on Fernando Alonso's ability, but I think understandably, Alonso's 43. By the time next year comes around and they've got a championship potentially contending car that they're trying to achieve in 26, he'll be 44. Over a very, very long season, would that be enough to beat a Max, a Hamilton, a Charles Leclerc, whatever? It's going to be a challenge, right? And it's also kind of difficult to say how close Alonso still is to being in his prime, because Lance Stroll isn't maybe, the competition that others would like to see. So, and we know that Stroll, for all that Lawrence, of course, would like to believe, and all that Mike Crack used to say, is not a driver, and even Fernando Alonso said that Stroll's a future world champion, or whatever he said a couple of years ago. But look, realistically, Stroll is not a driver that I think Aston Martin could be confident in to get the job done. And Max is, in terms of efficiency, scoring points week in, week out, he's been the best driver on the grid for now the last couple of years. Max would be the perfect conclusion, really, to the Aston Martin situation. Max is the cherry on top of the icing, on top of the cake, in terms of getting the job done within that team. So it should be no surprise that they're trying to make this work. And the fact that they're talking as if they have done is potentially quite telling, or, they're just trying to, let's say, manifest this reality where Max magically joins their team. But very much into your thoughts in the comments. Just one final thing. I know that Fred Vasseur was, as this individual says, somebody check on Fred's blood pressure, because for certain drivers, younger drivers often, they might say, the team might say, because I think even George, this year was like the first time he'd ever been allowed to go skiing, because potentially you can get injured. And most teams will do that. They'll say, look, guys, you can do stuff in your off season, but don't do anything that we don't want you to do. If you get injured, it's going to be problematic. For drivers like Hamilton, you're not going to be able to tell Hamilton what not to do. If he wants to go snowboarding, he's going to go snowboarding. That's how it's going to be. So very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.